this week's been one to celebrate women. With International Women's Day on Tuesday, it's a time to recognise the achievements of women around the world. In politics, it's been, and often still is, a fight to get women's voices heard. And one of the women who's been leading that fight in British politics for 4 decades is Labour MP Harriet Harman. She's the mother of the House of Commons, which means she's the longest-serving female MP still sitting. And earlier, I spoke to her in her first television interview since announcing her retirement. Harriet, thanks for coming on the show. You became an MP in 1982, and it was against the backdrop of mass protest against nuclear weapons. The women at Greenham Common, it ended up with thousands of people protesting across the UK. And now, as you prepare to stand down as an MP 40-plus years on, we've got this moment where President Putin has put his nuclear weapons back on alert. And I wondered what that made you think, as if we've gone back 40 years, back to the Cold War, back to a world that we thought maybe was in our past.
Well, I think that the path we've tried to go on since then is to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons, of having more and more countries becoming nuclear countries, and to reduce the nuclear arsenal of those superpowers that did have nuclear weapons. But it is one of the most frightening, in amongst the horrific things that's happened with Putin's invasion.
And Harriet, you've been a lifelong supporter of Labour values of internationalism. What do you think is the principal position to take on Ukraine? That they should fight tooth and nail to liberate their country, that there should be an immediate ceasefire and talks leading to a compromise? What should we be doing?
Well, I think what we should be doing is what we are doing, which is saying that they are absolutely right and entitled to defend themselves, and Putin is absolutely wrong to invade. We just have to be absolutely clear about that, and do everything we can to support them in their fight against Putin, which is a defence of themselves, a war that, as President Zelensky said to us in the House of Commons yesterday, a war that they did not start and they did not want.
What was it like in the Commons yesterday?
Well, it was a bit chilling, really, because it drew to your attention how safe and secure we are in the House of Commons, in London, in the UK, and we saw President Zelensky in such a position of jeopardy, with hundreds, if not thousands, of his people being killed and millions fleeing under attack from a nuclear power. I think it just showed the stark contrast.
And Harriet, you obviously support Sir Keir Starmer's position, but it has stoked division in the party. 11 MPs signed a letter accusing NATO of sabre-rattling, and then Keir Starmer threatened those MPs with suspension. Labour's always been a broad church. Do you think it was a bit aggressive to sort of threaten people with suspension?
Oh, not at all. I think that if you're the leader, you have to have a clear position, and you need to make sure the party has a clear position. And the Labour Party does have a clear position, which is we support NATO and we support Ukraine. And we couldn't have people who were Labour MPs somehow qualifying that. So I think he was right. I mean, one of the things about leadership is, yes, listen to and include a broad range of views, but in this sort of situation, you have to be decisive, and that's what he was.
The reason I wanted to get you on the show was it was International Women's Day this week. You have been the most prominent feminist campaigner in politics for many decades, actually. You're the longest-serving female MP. You're the true trailblazer. And I remember a few years back when I was talking to a Conservative MP about getting more Conservative women on the benches, they said, we need a Harman figure because you drove through such change. And I think we've got a picture somewhere of 1997 and Blair's Babes. Do you remember that? Can you see yourself there?
Oh,
Do you remember that
the
day?
green, yes.
Yeah. With Tony Blair, and there's the late Mo Molan in front of you. You were behind All Women Shortlist. What was it like back then when you had this breakthrough?
I think it was incredible, because it was a time when women were just saying, we're fed up with being regarded as second-class citizens. You know, we're fed up with the idea that you know, men should run the show and women should abide by everything that men say, and that we were fed up with being excluded from, you know, all walks of life, including political journalism. And so to have that breakthrough and to have women in the House of Commons representing a country which is 50% women was a very important moment. And, you know, as we went around, you know, if you went to the supermarket or you just went out and about in the street, people would come up and say, it's fantastic. Women would come up and say, it's fantastic to see you there in the House of Commons, because otherwise, previously, it had just been a sea of grey suits. There was 97% men and only 3% women, and Parliament was just downright unrepresentative. And that affected the public policy agenda. You know, we've still got a way to go. We've still got a way to go until women are really on equal terms.
There's the obvious question. There's ever been a female leader of the Labour Party. The Conservative Party had 2 female prime ministers. You know, some people might say that Labour has a bit of a woman problem. Is that fair?
Well, we've certainly got a woman problem in terms of never having a woman leader, which is downright embarrassing. And next time, although we're not going to be having a leadership election anytime soon, next time we do need a woman leader.
And
but that
who would your money be on?
Oh, you know, honestly, I'm going to let the future MPs and, you know, party members choose that. But the other thing is it can't be taken away from Labour that we did lead the way, and we did by ensuring we had all those Labour women MPs. Then the other parties began to look quite old-fashioned as men-only preserves, so they followed in that path.
Let's move on to another area which I know you've campaigned on and care deeply about, which is violence against women and girls, because, again, this is a very poignant and relevant issue at the moment. We've recently had the anniversary of the abduction and murder of Sarah Everard, that moment that lit a touch paper in this country where thousands of women came out to protest against violence against women and girls, rape cases at a record high, prosecutions a record low. When I interviewed the Home Secretary, she said all of us at some stage in our lives have been subject to all sorts of harassment. Is she right? Have you?
I think there's not a woman in this country who hasn't, at some point, at some part of her life, been followed down the street, been harassed on public transport, been sexually harassed at work. I mean, it's just every woman's universal experience. And what's happening now...
Harriet?
Oh, I mean, I was sexually harassed at work when I was a trainee solicitor. You know, like every schoolgirl, if I walked down the street, I was always looking over my shoulder and, you know, men would follow along in cars. And that's still happening today. But what is different today is that women are rightly saying, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We want curb crawling to be an offence. We don't want there to be impunity for men who rape women and say, well, she said no, but she actually meant yes. So I think that what is really important now is that women are no longer prepared to put up with what all of us have put up with. And also that when I was being sexually harassed at work in my 20s, there was no question of any complaints procedure.
What did you do about it? Did you
absolutely did nothing, said nothing to anybody.
What did you do to the man, or what did you just try and avoid him, or? What?
Well, I shrieked because he kind of came up and grabbed me from behind, but it wouldn't have occurred to me to be able to complain because he was senior and was, you know, my sort of line manager, and my future career completely depended on not being chucked out, and all the partners would have sided with him and I would have been regarded as a troublemaker. It's the same old story that every woman...
What did you do then? Just avoid him?
Just be... Well, it's sometimes very difficult to avoid somebody, especially you have to work in the same room as them, just the two of you on your own. But I think the thing is now that there's an expectation there should be complaint systems, that they should be independent, that women can complain anonymously so that they don't expose themselves to victimisation, and that they shouldn't have to be frightened on the street. And people talk about women not feeling at risk, but it's women are at risk. So what needs to be tackled is the sense amongst men that they can harass women and that's just banter or they can get away with it.
And Harriet, finally, let's come on to you and your decision to step down. You announced in December you were going to step down after 42 years of being an MP. And then since you took that decision, obviously your world was turned upside down with the sudden loss of your husband and fellow MP, Jack Dromey. And I want to say again how sorry we all are about that, Harriet. A week ago, there was the by-election in Birmingham Erdington, which was Jack's seat. Was that really difficult for you? How was that?
I think it would have been really difficult if we hadn't have won the seat and returned a Labour MP. I mean, Jack was born and brought up a Catholic, and he always said he was lapsed, but he never quite got beyond the notion of an afterlife. And I'm sure he certainly would be thinking he was up there looking down, and he would have been horrified if there'd been anything other than a Labour MP following in his footsteps. So it's good to have welcomed Paulette as the new Labour MP. And just on Jack, your enduring decades of a long partnership. You've got 3 children, you've got 5 grandchildren. You just told me you've got a 6th on the way, so you're going to be very busy. Jack described you quite rightly as the outstanding parliamentary feminist of her generation, and he said he was in awe of you. While you in the House of Commons, you talked about Jack being a superpower who made us all walk taller and feel stronger. Does the strength of what you had together kind of give you the strength to face the future now? Because it must be very discombobulating. But I think if you've lived with that sort of domestic propaganda, it can't help but, reinforce your confidence. And all of us get imposter syndrome from time to time and think that we can't do things. So to have that relentless positivity and belief is incredible. But it wasn't just me that was the beneficiary of that positivity and belief. That there are, women in the trade union that he worked in, other women in Parliament, that he would always be encouraging, because he believed that a role of men was to support and encourage women and not to stand in their way and hold them back. So I am left with surely that confidence that has been built up all of those years. But, we were together for 47 years, which is an incredibly long time to share your political journey and your life's journey with somebody. And the thing about being a widow after a long marriage is that, my mum lived till she was 100, so I might have another 30 years left. So this is a new chapter in my life, which I've got to figure out how to crack on with the things that I'm going to be doing for the next 30 years. And, people say, oh, now that you're on your own. But I'm not with Jack anymore, but I'm not on my own. I've got my children, I've got my friends, I've got my work colleagues. And I don't agree with the notion that somehow that's out there that when you're a widow, your life is effectively over, that the best years of your life are behind you and somehow you're a lesser person. I think that we've got to recognise that it's a different stage of life, and obviously it starts with great grief and loss, but people can be, they are themselves in widowhood, same as they are themselves at the rest of their life. And has it changed how you approach stepping down as a parliamentarian? Because presumably your next 30 years are going to be different now. Did you think about carrying on working? No, I haven't changed my mind about standing down. I've been an MP for decades, and for each day of those decades, I felt a great sense of responsibility for my constituents, for my role in Parliament. But at the end of the day, you can't carry on indefinitely. And I want to go when I'm still fully committed and doing the job to the best of my ability. And, I'll see what's on the other side of stepping down from having those magic letters MP after my name. Well, I'm sure that you will be doing many more interesting things, and I think your grandchildren are going to be keeping you very busy anyway. Harriet, thanks so much for coming on the show.